leveraging this kind of large exponentially computational space to handle problems such as portfolio optimization, right, or risk management, right? So there's a lot of interesting ideas there that are being looked at by various financial institutions. What I can say at this stage is portfolio theory, options pricing, these are very much now accessible from a quantum advantage perspective using our new Tempo system. Quantum key distribution and cybersecurity, that is, of course, front and center for financial services on a global basis. And so security and integrity of the data flow is, of course, vital. I always like to jokingly say that you can spot our quantum security customers because they are not in the news for data breaches.
Even agriculture could benefit from quantum computing in ways we haven't yet imagined.
Understanding processes such as nitrogen fixation to make things like better fertilizer, right, to help us grow better crops, right? Understanding things that are critical in impacting climate change, right, in terms of how carbon is handled, right? Other things including in better batteries, right, in terms of materials discovery.
The potential may be great, as are the investments being made. But when can we expect to see these potentially dramatic results? It turns out that depends on whom you ask. IBM has made getting to quantum advantage in the real world a strategic priority and has a timeline of getting there in a big way by 2029.
Our roadmap really shows the detail in terms of how we want to get from today to 2029. In between, we have this real important milestone also that we believe that with the community we'll be hitting quantum advantage, right, where there'll be some problems and claims of advantage where we'll see quantum really surpassing any classical methods of solving certain types of problems, right? And we are looking at various ways of showing that academically, scientifically, and also empirically from the ground up in terms of compared with various kinds of classical methods today. And then we're building a lot of it's like architecting a large skyscraper. We're building a lot of the foundational elements so that when we hit Starling at 2029, all the applications that people have been developing, all the software stack, all the eventual software libraries, they're still going to work, but they're going to work on a machine that's even more capable, something that can run hundreds of millions of gate operations compared to.
Here's what a salt-free water filtration system should cost in 2025. Tap below for pricing. Affordable water.
Even more capable, something that can run hundreds of millions of gate operations compared to several thousand of gate operations on the advantage level machines that we're building today.
IBM says it's on track to have quantum computing pay off in a big way by 2029. But IonQ's Damasi says they're already there.
So our machines we announced on September 12th at our Analyst Day are 36 quadrillion times more powerful than anyone else's machine, and that gap is increasing. Not only do we believe we are 5 years ahead of anybody else in the quantum computing business, whether it's government programs, adversaries, or commercial companies, but we also have the lowest unit economics. So we're able to build a fully fault-tolerant 2 million qubit system and keep our cost of goods sold under $30 million. Taking that together, it means that we're a fully fledged quantum internet solution. We can provide our customers a platform of computing, cybersecurity, networking, communications, and sensing, and there's no other company in the history of the world that's ever been able to supply a complete quantum internet.
Everyone in the quantum business seems to agree that Einstein was wrong, that it's either coming soon or is already here, and that it will be big. But figuring out who's ahead in this race sometimes feels like predicting those dice. IBM says it's ahead because it has more total qubits in its machines. IonQ says it's not the number of qubits, but the number of algorithmic qubits, putting it in front. And quantum company Quantinuum has yet a third measure of quantum volume. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised that there isn't a single measurement. It's like those qubits that are both ones and zeros at the same time, until they're observed. And it looks likely that we will all be able to observe what quantum computing can do for us in the very near future. Up next, an aging population needs lower interest rates. It's a problem countries throughout the West are facing. We tell the story of what the Netherlands is doing about it. This is a story about nest eggs. Those nest eggs we're all supposed to be putting away for our retirement years, with or without the help of the government or employers. Unfortunately, too many of us count on support that may or may not be enough to carry us in our later years.
We have still 57 million Americans who don't have any savings or any retirement plan.
Whether it's state-funded pension plans for teachers and policemen or Social Security for everyone, we all know about the looming problems in providing adequate income for retirees in the United States. But it's not just the U.S. that has a problem.
Many countries made provisions for those promises, and now promises are being cashed in. And many countries are saying, oh, wait, we don't want to pay the bill.
Teresa Ghilarducci is professor of economics and policy analysis at the New School in New York and author of Rescuing Retirement with Tony James. The challenges faced by retirees around much of the world are reflected in higher poverty levels of those over 65, with the OECD reporting that 40% of the elderly in Korea live on less than half of the median income in the country, and the United States just under 25%. Ghilarducci says one of the reasons is lower interest rates.
The life expectancy does not put a strain on pension system, but what has changed is over the past 20 years, there was a regime of very low interest rates, for lots of reasons. One of them was the financial crisis. A lot of it was the way that we managed our economies was to make sure that capital investment was low. That distorted a lot of decisions, but one of those things that it distorted is that the safe assets like government bonds didn't pay as much.
The U.S. is hardly alone in facing the coming retirement crisis, but one country, the Netherlands, is doing something about it. Adrian Reicher's firm is one of those putting those funds to work.
In the Dutch pension system, in the second pillar, there are around 1,600 billion euros of assets under management, which equates to around 1.5 times the GDP of the Netherlands.
That 1.6 trillion euros in Dutch pension assets accounts for 59% of all European pension funds, while having only 4% of the population, which means that it ranks near the bottom of the OECD numbers in elderly poverty at just under 5%. But despite having more assets set aside for retirement than any other European country, the Netherlands is about to overhaul the fundamentals of its pension system.
Now we are moving from defined benefits to defined contribution. And the reason for this change is mainly to increase the sustainability of the fund towards the future.
At first glance, the math seems straightforward. The old model wasn't sustainable. It was time for something new. But the debate over restructuring the system was anything but simple.
The private pillar is what is in the process of getting reformed now. That reform took a number of years to reach. Discussions started in the early 2000s after the dot-com crisis, when a number of Dutch pension funds saw their coverage ratios drop. It came to a conclusion sort of around the start of the pandemic, when the shape of the current pension reform was decided upon.
Stan Voiger is a senior fellow in economic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute and director of the Netherlands America Foundation.
That didn't mean, of course, that the political discussions around the reform completely dissipated. In the outgoing government, the Schoof cabinet that was in place for the past year or so, there was one political party, the New Social Contract Party, that was quite aggressively opposed to the pension reform as it had been designed, and they in fact tried to derail it by letting individual workers and retirees vote on an industry by industry or occupation by occupation or even firm by firm basis on whether to remain under the old pension system, which is a defined benefit system basically, or whether to accept transition to the new, more collective defined contribution system. That effort by them ultimately failed. It lost their vote in Parliament, but only barely. And I think that was really the end of political uncertainty around this pension reform. Not only because that vote failed, but also because the Schoof government fell this summer. We had elections, and the party most associated with those efforts to basically undo the pension reform to a significant extent, that party lost all of its seats in parliament.
The Dutch pension plan changes may be controversial, but necessary, given the larger forces that all retirement plans in Western countries are facing.
The move to defined contributions is something that we see all across the globe. If we look at the pension index that is published yearly, if you look at what pension advisors and actuaries are saying, exactly, these changes are not specific to just the Netherlands, but because we have such a large pension buildup, we have so much capital in the system, very high adequacy rates, it is very prevalent in the Dutch system.
Bookstores are thriving again as retailers reimagine stores as curated experiences, using tools that depend on reliable and secure connectivity from AT&T Business. Because reading is a journey of discovery, and a book is a compass that helps us find the way forward.
System. Since the global financial crisis, interest rates have been in steady decline, mainly because of monetary policy and because of the way that pension liabilities are valued. They have a direct link with interest rates. And as interest rates decrease, the liabilities of pension funds increase and thus place a burden on the pension fund sustainability. But also on top of that, you have longevity, which has increased amongst the participants. And coverage in the Netherlands of the second pillar pensions is very high. The way in the old system that we had, the way it worked is that employees would usually stay at the same firm that they started at or stay within the same industry and work until the retirement age. And if this happened, the current pension system was perfectly equipped for this. But nowadays, we see more and more people moving away from a lifetime employment and moving more into self-employment.
One way to address the increased number of people relying on their pensions amid lower interest rates might be to extend the time when people start receiving their benefits. But that is not the way the Netherlands chose to go.
The reforms mainly are in the way we invest and changing from defined benefits to only defining the contribution.
The Dutch system is designed to increase the size of the available pie by permitting pension asset managers to invest in higher risk and higher yield assets for younger workers with many years to go until their retirement.
You now go to a more individual approach with your collective investments in that you have to see what individual investors need at certain age groups. So for instance, a young person on average has less financial capital, but still has a lot of years to work in its career. And what that enables younger investors to do is to take on more risk, because the biggest determinant of capital buildup at a young age is the contributions you get each year. But as you near the end of your career, contributions become less of a big part, less of a big influence on the income that you will have on retirement. And the income or the focus shifts from contributions to investment results that should be stable and lower in shocks.
Whether permitting more flexible investments, particularly riskier ones for earlier in a worker's life, will work or not, it does relieve the pensions from facing obligations greater than their resources, but also means that one's benefits could go up or down depending on the markets. Getting people to agree to this big change took time and all the stakeholders working together.
One distinguishing feature of the Dutch system of policymaking is that there's a lot of focus on consensus building between employers, employees, and the government. The fact that the Netherlands has these structures that facilitate the coming together of business and labor, I think is particularly helpful in the pension context. There are lots of political problems where there are all sorts of other stakeholders involved, but in the pension context, it really still is employers and employees who have to come together and reach agreement on how to design the pension system.
What can the rest of the world learn from the Dutch in providing for retirement? Perhaps a lesson in persistence. The most recent changes are just the latest in a series of attempts at pension reform. Go back to the 80s under Ronald Reagan, when they did take steps to try to extend Social Security. What made it possible then that doesn't make it possible now?
Well, what made it possible for a bipartisan commission and a fix to happen was that the crisis was only 1 year away. It had to do with surprise inflation and a surprise among the actuaries that they wouldn't have enough money in the shortfall. So money needed to be infused into the system immediately. And so the Greenspan Commission under the Reagan administration recommended that the payroll tax be increased. And everybody agreed. Later, when it came to Congress, there was some political effort to say, well, if we're going to raise taxes, we have to really look to see how much the taxes have to be increased. And so we did said, well, since everybody's living longer, that represents that, and we'll raise the green infusion of cash and taxes were increased. Maybe that's what we need to raise taxes, is to have a real look at what taxes pay for. And everyone likes their Social Security benefits.
Whether it's relying more on the capital markets in Netherlands or turning to taxpayer contribute more, the United States and other Western nations have some tough choices to make, and they need to be made sooner rather than later as people live longer and we want to provide for them without stealing from the future. Coming up, getting to zero emissions despite those data centers. Finland leads the way. This is a story about featuring a problem instead of fixing it. This month at COP30 in Brazil, world leaders are trying to get back on the path to net zero emissions, despite the huge and growing demand of data centers for more energy. But one European country is already a decade ahead. Finland has set the most ambitious climate target in the world, pledging to reach carbon neutrality by 2035. And it's featuring the problem of data center growth to get there. Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie has the story from Helsinki.
Discover a journey where no two moments are like the next, where every detail is intentionally crafted to match your spirit. The Ritz-Carlton Out Collection, unlike the rest.
Finland, home to 5 million people and 3 million saunas. Here, warmth isn't just a comfort, it's a culture. But now, the nation that has perfected staying warm in any condition is finding a new way to do it. 50 meters below the streets of Helsinki, a hidden network of tunnels hums with the sound of machinery. So where are we?
We are at the Helen heat pump station where we do cooling for the Helsinki data centers. And we take the cool and sell it as a heat in Helsinki households.
Our guide through this underground maze is Olli Sörkkä, CEO of Helen, one of Finland's largest energy providers, and the company turning data center heat into power for the city. Here's how it works. Above ground data centers, the engines of our digital lives, generate vast amounts of heat as they power everything from AI to streaming video. That heat is captured and piped into Helen's system, where heat pumps raise and send it through the city's district heating network. The same system then returns cooled water back to the data centers. It's a test case for whether our growing... When you have partners like Equinix and Microsoft and Tele come to you to work with your partner with Helen, what are they getting?
A problem with heat, and they need to cool down somehow their premises. And our job is to sell heat. So the starting point for this discussion is, so in normal practically all of the terms of heat, in heat pumps and all kind of cooling equipment. And if they cooperate with us, they don't have to do that investment. We do it for them, and we take the heat out. And on top of that, monetize the excess heat by selling it to our customers. So they save all the cooling cost, and it turns to business for us.
So that's a big capex outlay for you,
Yes.
and capex that they don't have to be putting
Exactly.
and factoring into their spending plans.
Exactly. The capex is needed, but it's done by us, and we can get a very good, profitable business around that capex. So it works for us.
For the local community, the benefits are tangible. Electricity prices that sit below the EU average. Helen's newest partnership is expected to provide warmth for roughly 1,500 homes.
We have been able to increase our profits. At the same time, we have now lowered our prices 2 times in a row during the last 2 years.
The impressive progress in Helsinki is set against a challenging global backdrop. According to Bloomberg New Energy Finance Research, data centers could consume about 4.4% of global electricity by 2035. If they were a country, they'd rank 4th in electricity use, just behind China, the US, and India. And cooling them already takes up nearly a third of that energy, according to the World Economic Forum.
So this is the bus of the internet and our digital society. So in here you have what we sometimes refer to as clouds.
Helen manages the heat, but it's Equinix that runs the data centers. More than 270 of them worldwide.
A data center is a part of everything we do digitally.
Regina Donato Dahlstrom heads their Nordic operations.
So inside of these are servers that are co-located by enterprise customers of Equinix and connectivity, so connections. So altogether we host over 490.
Make the capital investment.
Do you also do it because it's a valuable revenue?
It's not a really significant revenue stream compared to the overall data center business. So we're not looking at heat export as a new revenue stream. We're looking because it supports our customer sustainability targets and reporting. It also helps the communities where we operate to cut carbon emissions.
In Europe, the Middle East, and Africa.
Project that we're working on in Finland, we're working with Fortum to leverage the waste heat from our data center to decarbonize their local heating system and provide heating to local homes, over 250,000 local homes, in fact.
In the data center race, efficiency is the new currency, and even the world's big hyperscalers aren't immune from the pressure to balance growth with sustainability.
Clearly, AI is growing in its use case and diffusion across the globe, and we're seeing that in our own business. And clearly, we need to do more of the same things in sustainability and contract further renewable energies. So there's a lot of great opportunities that we have ahead of us.
Momentum is building. In Finland, almost 100 data center operators are in discussions with Helen, exploring projects that would feed their own excess heat into the city's energy system. What do you think your example says about Finland's approach to decarbonising its economy, but growing at the same time?
Well, I think, and I hope we can show to the rest of the world that you can do the decarbonizing in a profitable way. Because I don't believe it's going to happen if it's by state or EU or any other regulatory. Find a way how to go to CO2 zero so that you can, then it starts to happen. And I really hope we can be an example how that is done.
In a moment when our digital lives demand more than ever, Helsinki offers a quiet reminder that progress isn't measured only in speed and scale, but in the balance we keep as the world races ahead.
Up next, the chips that quantum computing will need. We've heard so much about the GPU chips AI needs, which have catapulted NVIDIA to the top of the leaderboard. But what about quantum? How are they different? And who's making them? Jerry Chow of IBM gave us a tour at the Thomas J. Watson Center in Yorktown, New York.
With modularity and data centers, right? So the way to think about it is really this is a modular architecture. What's right behind us right here, this is actually the cryogenic part of it. This is actually cryogenic system which cools down.
That chandelier.
Cools down in the moment there are 3 Heron processors that are cooled inside of this cryogenic infrastructure. And over time, that kind of cryogenic infrastructure can be modularly scaled. The footprint can be increased. And then hanging off on the wings over here are actually classical control electronics. So the pieces that generate the signals to manipulate the qubits, read out the qubits, they're all in here, right? And they're actually located right next to it because we need to make sure that they have more time scales for the control and latency. Similarly, as you need to scale to a larger footprint, we can scale the amount of control electronics that are located right around it. But overall, this is really that in mind.
But if I look behind there, it would look like a rack like I see in
electronics. We have, at the moment, these are FPGA control boards. This is actually our latest Nighthawk quantum chip, right? And so the Nighthawk is 120 qubits arranged in a square lattice, so it's more connected in the Heron processor in the previous generation. But what you're looking at is the chip mounted into a printed circuit board. This printed circuit board, you can see it has space for where the connectors come down. These connectors come down to bring the signals to manipulate the states of the qubits or read them out. And then this is basically bolted and mounted at the bottom of our dilution refrigeration systems at 15 millikelvin.
Is this the chip right here?
That's the chip right there.
And other than this is the printed circuit board on the flip side.
Yeah, so it's mounted up into this printed circuit board, and then let's see all these various connectors.
And does one of these chips go into one of those chandeliers?
Yeah, so effectively we're able to fit a varying number of these into cryogenic infrastructure. Big part of that comes down not necessarily limitation to the size of this, but the size of the kind of wiring that comes. And so a big push of how we're scaling infrastructure comes down to miniaturizing some of the wiring and the cabling and miniaturizing other components, right, that are within, so that we can get more control for larger numbers of chips within the same kind of cryogenic footprint.
So I'm going to go way past what I understand. Back in the old days of sort of electronics, you talk about whether they're rigged up in series or in parallel.
Right.
You put multiple chips inside one. Is there an analog?
Yeah, so that's
series or parallel.
That's actually a funny point there. Like, so you can place these multiple chips inside. We actually are going to be connecting them with. We actually are going to be connecting them with cryogenic quantum links over the next year. So we actually have this technology that we actually demonstrated at different architectures that we have. We call it Flamingo. But it actually allows us to scale these and network in a quantum way these various chips together. There's already this kind of this strategy for scaling module by module. Another way is actually networks in the control electronics that also lets you communicate between these chips too, so that you can actually perform a circuit on one, measure the qubits, and in almost real time decide to do something on another chip. So this kind of dynamic circuit piece is also another capability that we have built as part of our overall infrastructure and platform.
Does adding more chips reduce error?
So that piece is that's not how we're approaching the error correction strategy. Strategy comes down to actually fundamentally different layout of how we are arranging the various qubits on the device. What that does in terms of having multiple chips really allows us to run a variety of different types of quantum circuits. So you have different kinds of applications that might be possible by leveraging this kind of tight coupling of different chips. So is actually what's on. So this is actually a stack of 2 chips. So there's actually a butterfly down and another chip that comes on top.